Hello, everybody. Bo Hudson with you again, talking about one of my favorite topics, voiceover. And I have a fantastic guest for you today. It's John Willyard, who has had, one of the most illustrious careers in radio. And what we're going to mainly talk about today is radio imaging. So let's welcome John to the show. Hi, John.
Bo, it's so good to be with you. I've been looking forward to this for
Yes.
as long as we've had it on the books.
And I know you like talking about voiceover too.
Absolutely. Yes, it's our
Yes.
bread and butter.
Yep. And it's been your life for a long, long
Yeah,
time. So
sure has.
before we get into the many things that we're going to be talking about regarding radio imaging, which you're one of the most well-known radio imagers in the country. Give us a little brief history, a little background. How did you get into radio, and then how did you get into radio imaging?
Well, that's so interesting that you put it that way, because it seemed like the two went hand in hand from the very first month. And that was being in a little private liberal arts college in San Francisco. They had an FM station called KCMA. And KCMA had a 90.3. I still remember the frequency. And every week, and I was 18 years old, and every week we'd get a call from the University from Cal Berkeley. And they'd say, "Can you check your transmitter? Because you're blowing us off the dial." I think they were 90.1. And we'd go over there, look at the parameters, everything's fine. And we'd hang up, and then they'd call us the next week with the same question. I know I was doing a type of we were doing live programming, and we all seemed to have clever names for our shows. We didn't play rock music. We were more eclectic. My program is called The Slipped Disc. Apologies to anybody who's ever had one. But I was doing imaging at the time and didn't know what to call it.
Oh.
But producing things that I'd heard people on the big stations in San Francisco and wherever I would consume radio. And that always stayed with me. That became a real favorite in whatever iteration radio for me became. So that's where it started really early. Yeah.
Well, you just made me think of a good question, and that is your voice. And I know that people who hire you appreciate this. You have a fantastically unique voice, but not only is it just the texture of your voice, but your phrasing, the way you speak, which I know you have worked on for years and years where it is now. But was that something that you knew about before that little job you talked about? Did you know you had a fantastic voice, and were you a singer, or how did you get that voice? I guess that's my question.
Those are great questions. I was a singer. I had sung ensemble work. I had sung. Now, my parents were both classically trained vocalists. My dad took lessons from Nelson Eddy's teacher.
Oh, my gosh.
And then after my mother passed away, I realized, wow, she was the go-to person to do the solos at Ventura College.
Oh.
I found all these printed programs and it would say Patty Martin. I'd look at one after the other. So the funny thing about that is my favorite voice to impersonate as far as singing, which I've done parody stuff, is Johnny Mathis. Now, but I don't limit myself to any one voice. So a lot of my stations know that they can go to me for singing a little, like a line that might be like Luke Bryan or something. I might grab a part of that and sing in the same key as maybe a tag out, that kind of thing.
Did you do choir when you were young?
I did choir at the same college. But I had also sung in my dad's church, because my dad was a pastor all my life.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
So I cut my teeth on not only singing but playing. I was a trumpet player, very serious trumpet player, beginning in the third grade. And in the Los Angeles County schools, we had a full orchestra called the Festival Orchestra. It was made up of hand selected from each of the elementary schools. Our director would take the best players. So
Mm.
you could be in it from fourth, fifth, sixth grade, and I was each of those years.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a thrill, being able to,
Yeah.
to be that.
And how about your good diction? You speak well, you're very articulate. I think people learn that
I'm trying real hard
well, no, you
right
are.
now with you.
And I know it's important to you. So you must have grown up hearing people, maybe your father speaking in church or something.
That's a really good point. Oh, also, this is one that just came to my mind. Probably the greatest speaker of the English language, Alexander Scorby.
Hmm.
And he narrated the entire Bible. And we had a set of it on 45.
Oh.
The little, but it would run at 16 2/3. So you could get a lot of stuff on there. But
yeah.
so
But you
I
listened
think
to him, so you could
hearing
hear
people like
what
that.
a good speaker sounded like.
And
when you were
early
young.
television. I mean, I grew
Yes.
up watching 1950s television.
Right.
Newscasts, Walter Cronkite, Eric Sevareid, all those people.
Yeah, and would you sort of copy them a little bit when you were young? Or did you know what you were
I
going to do
did.
when you were young? Or did you
I
contemplate that?
I must have known something about wanting to work in network television, because I'll tell you, I ran across, and I remember doing this in art class, or what, we didn't have art class, we had just classes, where you now pull out your art stuff. And I did a television stage with lighting. I wrote this all out on crayon or pencil. And it had curtains, and it had television cameras that said CBS on the side of it, and boom mics and lighting. And it was kind of just a simple, and little would I know that by 1996, I would actually be working on a CBS network show.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
TV. Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump ahead. So you were working at the little station, and then, somebody must have heard you, or then you went up the ladder to other stations.
Well, I
Bigger
never
stations.
finished school, because at the end of the freshman year there at Simpson College in San Francisco, it was the most beautiful spot. It was in the Portola section of San Francisco. It was on a hill. It was actually called University Hill. You could look out of the back window of the station and see Sproul Plaza, see the Bay Bridge, see downtown San Francisco. It was a beautiful, beautiful view. And so somebody was listening, a couple of people were, and they recommended me for this listener-supported Christian radio network that was based in San Francisco. They also had a flagship station whose calls were KEAR. And so I started working with both of them at age 19.
Wow. Yeah. And you learned the ropes.
Oh, man.
From other announcers.
I'm looking at a book right now up in my bookcase. One of the guys that I worked with is listed in the golden age of radio, John Arthur.
Oh. And
John had done a show back in the 50s on ABC radio called Big John and Sparky. And I got to work with him.
Yeah.
And when he passed away, his widow told me, John, he wanted you to know everything that he did.
Yeah.
I got really close to him. There were some great people. Yeah, I couldn't have paid for experience like that.
Yeah. So you learned from those old timers who really knew how to do it. Yeah.
Yes. And there was one guy, because he would fill network 60 seconds spots. I actually saw him one time do this with his thumb. He was doing seconds. He wasn't looking at a clock.
Yeah.
And he nailed it every time.
Yeah. Incredible. So you went on to bigger and better radio stations up the ladder. And I know that you loved being on the air. You were on the air a lot. And so tell us, how did that move into just doing radio imaging?
It came to a point, and that's a great, great question, because it really evoked the very necessary question that my wife and I would ask And that was, do you want to just keep chasing, go to a bigger market? And I didn't,
Yeah, it's
because
hard.
I could have gone, I could have kept going up and up and up. I mean,
Hmm.
I did get to market 10, I guess Atlanta is 10. And by that time, I really didn't want to chase that personality. I thought I was going to be a personality, but then, like I said about that college station, starting the love of doing that, which I couldn't quite uh, articulate with a name. Imaging, radio imaging.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I always wanted to do that.
Hmm.
And you could write down on one piece of paper all of the significant people who were doing that type of work
Hmm.
back then, 30 years
Hmm.
ago.
Right.
Now it's just reams of
Yeah.
name after name, column after column, page
Right.
after page. Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
So
And
I
then,
got it.
yeah.
I think I got in and made a mark, made a name early enough, just at the right time. I really think
Yeah.
before the floodgates opened.
That's exactly right. And you made a name for yourself. So, and then you also, gosh, I forgot the production company you worked for. Help me out. It's
Oh,
Bill?
just outside of Houston, Bill
Yeah,
Young Productions.
that's right. And you did all those major like concert commercials because your booming voice, and then, like Led Zeppelin or whatever. Didn't you do a lot of concert
Yes,
promotions?
yes, we did. We did that. We did Def Leppard, Metallica. Some of my personal at the time, and this will identify the time uh, uh, in which I did these, was Michael Bolton. I did the Michael Bolton World Tour. That was in
Mm.
early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
The Kings of Comedy, the Def Comedy Jam, I did those. Whitney Houston. Um, uh, but the funny thing was, we would have to sound so similar that you would have the template of the 60-second concert commercial, and sometimes the slug lines or the image lines in the commercial would remain the same, and it might be originally voiced by Bill, and then
Mm-hmm.
somebody else like Steve Kelly, who was his right hand guy, and he sounded like Bill. He would build on that. He would do something else. Then it would get to the point where now it's being customized for a market. Let's say San Antonio. You're doing the dates and the venue and then the local ticket information. Used to have to give the phone number because there was no, back then you couldn't use the website. There was no websites.
Right. Right.
There was always a phone number. So it took, more time. And one time I'll never forget this. It was a Metallica commercial, and I asked the guy, played it down the line for approval, and I said, "How many voices did you hear on that commercial?" He said, "Well, one. That was Bill, right?" I said, "No, there were three. There was
Wow.
Bill, Steve Kelly, and myself.
Wow.
We just had to sound so similar."
There was that style. You had to
Yes,
fit that style. Not every announcer could do those. You had to have, the way that you did that. Yeah, it was
absolutely.
pretty amazing.
And at the time, they actually had some literature, some brochures that said every 22 seconds in the world, a Bill Young commercial was playing.
Yeah.
And they did, whether that's true or not, but they did 75% of all the touring commercials, TV and radio.
Hmm.
They handled that much business.
Wow, amazing.
And he was the greatest businessman. Such integrity, not only
Mm,
talent, but just I could tell you stories. Yeah,
mm, mm,
such
mm.
integrity. Good man.
So now, did that sort of blend into you doing the radio imaging for other stations?
Interestingly, I was moonlighting all of the early imaging that started with one station in Los Angeles, KZLA. And I went in through the back door on that one. And here's how. I had worked with a guy in Atlanta named Ken Cooper. Ken had been on WNOE FM and some other major stations and worked at 94Q in Atlanta. And after he left there, I wondered where he went. And then he called me one day and said, I'm doing mornings at KZLA. He was also voicing that he's the guy who said, you got to do live television, network television,
Mm.
because he was doing some Academy of Country Music Awards, and he was doing Hot Country Nights on Saturday nights. It was a Saturday night special. And so that always stuck. So he said, I know I can trust you for doing some imaging. So not only did I voice it, but I produced it and I did it for his show. Well, the PD then went on the air. He
Mm-hmm.
carted it up.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Guerra was the PD, bless his
Mm-hmm.
heart. He's driving in and he walks in the control room and he said, now, knowing that I was a program director, as you do, he had every right to say, who is that? And get him
Mm-hmm.
off the air because I didn't hear this and I didn't approve it.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, he got well, let's put him on the whole station. So that's where that started in
Yeah.
1991. I'll never forget it. But then by that time, a few weeks, actually, literally a few weeks, we were in the transition of leaving Northern California to go to Bill Young. So I was doing all that on the side. I was having to moonlight that. I'd have to go in early, do it at lunch, stay till late. It
And where
got
would you
so
do that? What studio would you do that?
in the same in
In the
the same,
same?
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I
And
want, go ahead.
and
Sorry.
all on reel to reel. And then I
Yes.
would take advantage of the fact that they had one of the latest pickup times in the central time zone. The FedEx truck would back up it and load up everything, all the work, because none of it was streamed out. None of it was
No.
digital. It was all
Mm-mm.
you had to put it physically to beta tape or reel to
Mm-hmm.
reel or whatever. So I took advantage of that until 9 p.m. So I could work till 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Debbie didn't like that, of course, but we were building our business. Yeah.
Well, I want to mention to the people listening to the podcast or watching this on YouTube or whatever, there's no chance that if you have lived in the United States, you have not heard John Willyard, on some radio station doing the radio imaging, because you are and were and have been just everywhere on radio. And I don't know that people, are cognizant of that, but we know it's true, because how many markets do you think you've been in?
Ooh, total.
Well, I know you don't know the answer to that.
I bet at least markets. Boy, I haven't nailed it down to the
Every state, I'm sure.
at least 300, 300 to 400 markets. That's a
Mhm.
great question because a
And
lot
we're
of the
talking, small towns, big
yeah,
cities,
yeah.
metropolis cities. You people have heard you without a
Some
doubt.
days it's so interesting too because some days at the end of the day I'll go, oh, I did a much better job today for market number 256 than I did for market 10. I just happened to, yeah,
Just happened to do
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
And I think a lot of it is based on the feel that you get with that station, the
Mm.
personnel that you work with.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about the relationship really that's so important.
Most of the work that you have done in radio imaging has been for country stations, and
Yes.
I know you've done a lot of for other formats as well. But why do you think that is with the country stations, and your voice and your delivery?
I think because of people like Garth Brooks, and Clint Black and Clay Walker and Mark Chestnut and Trisha Yearwood. That stable of voices were really coming up in their prominence about the time that I locked on to country. And there is really where going to Bill Young, and they were doing so much country work. Do you know Bill was a former program director, and yet he became a music director of over 100 music videos,
Mm.
over
Oh my
100.
gosh.
And they were doing a lot of their business was the country acts. And I took another look at country at that point and went,
Mm-hmm.
this is where I really want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
This is the format. And I have to tell you that the people who work in the shows, the big network country award shows, they're all, you can plug them into the MTV or to the BET or to the Grammys because they all work all those shows. And they say the country artists are the most wonderful people to work with, and just across the board. Yeah.
And not to mention, again, we're talking about style. And
Yeah.
style in radio imaging is so important. It isn't just the voice, but it's that phrasing, the style, and you fit in so well with that country format. What do you think? What is the style you think for country radio imaging?
Well, you can break it down. I think there's the mainstream, the new country, and of course there used to be the young country. That used to be a big hip phrase in the '90s. So I think that was more of an everyman or a boy next door sound, a
Yep.
younger sound.
Yep.
Now I can sound like all those things, I can,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to do. I've listened to some of the old voice tracks of stuff I did 25 years ago, and a lot of it was like the Bill Young. It was that pounding big concert sound, but
Mm-hmm.
I've not softened it so much, but made it lighter and more fun. I mean, I just have more and more fun every year, lightening it up,
Mm-hmm.
more energy. And a lot of people think that you had to bring a twang with it,
Mm.
and you don't. Now there
Mm-mm.
are times when you can throw it in and
But
have
you lay
fun.
it on purpose on that, though.
Yeah,
I know you
exactly,
do. I've heard you do that. You lay it
exactly.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, it's a straight ahead mainstream kind of sound, just
Yeah.
sounding like you're having fun. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had people say it sounds like you're having fun. Now, one of the
Yeah.
true tests with what I love, this is a litmus test with, am I getting this comedy bit or this read across to them? Maybe they haven't heard this at all, and a lot of my sessions are predicated on ad lib or stuff that I've just retained for years and years and years, especially seasonal things
Mm-hmm.
like Valentine's, Mother's Day. I've been doing a lot of Mother's Day things, like motherhood. If you feel crazy, you must be doing it right, something like that.
Right.
Uh, or dear, I'll make the sound of like I'm writing a note with a pencil, and dear mom, happy Mother's Day. Thanks for everything. Thanks for wiping my butt. That's all, stuff like that. Now,
Right.
when they write back and say, something you said today in the session made me spew beverage out of my nose, that's my litmus test with you. You did it right. You accomplished your goal. And that's one of my that's one of my top goals. That's the thrill of knowing uh, that I elicited a response.
I almost think that style that you have, uh, you originated that. I'm going to bet you may not admit that, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that country music radio imaging style came from you. And
Wow.
people emulate that. But I think you started it. And did you start with the Wolf stations? I want to mention those because you've done so many of those. And what I'm talking about is the way that you do the radio imaging for those strong, the wolf and the eagle, or they want a very a big style, a booming
Yeah,
style that I think you came up with.
I think you're right. I really hadn't thought about it that much, but I think you're right. And
Mm-hmm.
I would have to, and I think I've done all the animals. I mean, I've done the coyotes and the cats and
The
the
hawk.
wolves, and and there's even one in Western New York. It's the big pig. Now, I actually was thinking about Bob Bergen, and I did. I'll have to,
Oh,
I'll
yes.
have to, I'll have to find this Porky that I did, but I did this character, and and I had to listen to him and kind of study, what is it about that stutter and
Yes.
that not being quite sure of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fantastic. Oh, did you know that when I was at Bill Young, they did all these Six Flags over America, Six Flags commercials for all of the Six Flags,
Mm.
TV and radio.
Mm-hmm.
There was one TV market, I think it was in New Jersey, and they couldn't get the clearance to have the authorized voice of Bugs Bunny, but there were two spots in there where he would like pop up through like a little hole that came out of the ground, animated, of course, and it was supposed to be Bug's voice. Well, they couldn't use the authorized voice. Well, Bill was speaking to the person on the line, the person who was overseeing this, and said, "Well, I have a guy on staff who can do that." He didn't ask me, but so for the next 30 minutes, I worked myself up to it, and I did cover to the extent that there's a page out there that somebody sent me that said something like voice actors behind or behind the faces, behind the voices.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I'm actually listed as one of the voices of Bugs Bunny
For Pete's sakes.
from that one commercial.
Now,
Is that crazy?
that is crazy. Do you feel like can you copy? Okay, this is a very complicated question I'm going to ask you, and I'll refer to myself with this, okay? For whatever reason, I have great audio hearing.
Yes.
I have something that a lot of other people don't have. I can
Yeah.
copy people, and I used to do that when I was a little girl. Do you think that you have that too, some special thing about hearing and then doing it with your voice and some brain thing?
Yes, and and my dad had some really good impersonations that I would hear him do when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I really appreciated where he was
Mm-hmm.
going with this, and so I think it engendered in me, or I was always interested, like we talked about being watching great television in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
They're local because we were living under the signal of LA stations,
Mm-hmm.
and then you had the network programming, you had the local and the network, and they were all very impersonable characters,
Mm-hmm.
people that you emulated. Yeah, so I've always felt that way.
And is that how you did the Bugs Bunny? You listen to it, listen to it, listen to it, and then within time, you're doing it.
Yes, and it's something that Pat Fraley talked about in one of your wonderful YouTube videos,
Thank you.
where it really comes down to you've got to embody the character. You are the character.
You know what we haven't even mentioned yet? The big award just recently, the Country Radio Hall of Fame for radio imaging of all things.
Isn't that
And
crazy?
aren't you the only person that's ever gotten into the Hall of Fame with radio imaging?
That's true. That's true. Everybody else has been, disc jockey, or in the case of somebody like Larry Wilson, who's a group owner, he's the
Right,
guy who's
right.
Citadel
Mm-hmm.
Broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
So from those angles, yes, I'm the first to be recognized as, like they said in Nashville at the Country Radio Seminar. They said they termed it from a voice acting side, which I appreciated that they
Yes.
did that.
Yes.
That they said that, put it that way, because
Yeah,
that's
so
what it is.
They didn't say radio imaging. They said voice acting, which is what we're talking about
Yeah,
today.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And have you gotten that award? I mean, do they physically have the Country Radio Hall of Fame awards?
So it's interesting how many things are required. It's not just a walk in the park, like you just show up.
Mm-hmm.
They want it's going to be beautiful, because I've seen it in past years, and it's gotten only better through the years for the recipients. They have a timeline that they're going to have. They're going to put that on the big screens on the night of July 10th in Nashville at the Virgin Hotel, but they're going to put it on social media as well. And so they said, send us as many pictures as you. It just kept growing and growing, and I kept finding it really became rather daunting that I realized, oh, now I'm really I've kind of set myself up where I've become a part of this process where I don't want to let them down, and I kind of don't want to let myself down either, because interestingly, when you look back and you see all those pictures, people you've almost forgot that you met,
Yeah.
artists,
Yeah.
big name
Yes.
people, and broadcast colleagues, it just becomes overwhelming to the extent that, wow, I did a lot of living,
Will we normal people be able to see it on July 10th, or how is that going to be presented?
even abnormal people.
Oh, good. Makes me happy. I'm in.
No. So I know last year they streamed it on Facebook.
Okay.
I'll find the link and send it to you later, so you can
Great.
see last year's.
Okay.
But I kind of studied it because I know I've been to some live in the past. maybe my first was in 2010. And I was there the night that my hero, the guy who really, and I didn't mention his name yet, Rusty Walker. Rusty
Mm.
Walker was the consultant. He was consulting KZLA that we referred to earlier. So the program director, Bob Guerra, and he talked, and then he got together with his buddies. Rusty Walker programming out of a little tiny town in Mississippi, in the northeast corner called Iuka, Mississippi. And that's where his base was for many years. He passed away about 7 years ago, heart attack. But he was the guy. He and his team were the ones who started recommending me right out of the box.
Mm.
And within just a couple of months, I had maybe 24 stations.
Wow.
And
See,
I
what
was
you
at Bill.
need. Yeah.
Now I was at Bill Young at the time, and I would get it. The secretary at the front, they'd say, as so and so's on line 2. I pick up the phone and they'd say, "Could you send us a demo?" Of course, demos were on cassette and the FedEx, overnight. And then I'd say, "Well, how did you hear about me?" Rusty Walker. Every time it was Rusty Walker.
Mm.
So I owed it. So I was so happy to see him go in. So he was inducted on in I think 2010.
Mm.
And he sure championed me for many stations, some of which I'm still on, after 15 plus, 20 plus, 25 plus, and one at 31 years.
Didn't you say you're still on 90 stations?
I carry 90. That's a comfortable number because they don't all have access every day or every week. It just happens to work out. Yeah.
When they want you to do work, you do it. Is that how it happens?
Yeah, they send the copy, but it's related to what is in the agreement. Some of them have one session a month. Some have maybe 4. So that would work out to once a week, that kind of thing. Yeah. And so it works out.
You are with Atlas Agency.
Yes. Yes, they've been representing me for about 21 years.
So them being your agency,
yes.
Do they work out all those agreements ahead of time and then say, "John, this is what you're doing, and do you accept this?" And then you do? Is that how
That's
that
exactly.
Happens?
And if people contact me directly, a lot of times I'll get a message through Facebook Messenger, and they'll ask me for rates, and I say, "That's above my pay grade. I don't even talk about numbers."
That's right.
So that's what the agents do. And they take the 10% and invoice and negotiate, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
That's a good relationship.
And they've represented me well. They really have. Not just on the radio side, but commercially and television work, narration. Yes.
Yeah, well, they're number one. Most people think Atlas is number one. So that's a good deal. Now, when you send your pictures in for the Country Radio Hall of Fame Awards, I know a lot of them are going to come from the CMA Awards. Where you voice.
How did you know?
Well, because I've seen a lot of them. I mean, you've got pictures with almost every major country singer there is, male and female, because you did a lot of that live announcing. That's what I want to touch on, because not only do you have done radio, you were, an announcer, you do radio imaging, but you do live announcing too for big shows. And I want you to touch a little bit. What is that like when they fly you in, and how does that work technically?
Interestingly, I thought when you said they fly you in, so one of the last big ones that I got to do was on Fox, and it was the 50 year. It was called 50 Years of Beautiful, and it was the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. And when they said, "We want you to get," okay, and it's going to be at the Kodak Theater in Hollywood. And of course, I'm thinking this grandiose thoughts. And then they called the next day and said, "We don't have the budget to fly you. Can you do it in your studio?" And I said, You mean I don't get to mingle with the supermodels and Kodak Theater? That's so good by the wayside. So I watched it on TV. But that was close. So I would drive up beginning in 1996 because it was only a 4-hour drive, less than 4 hours to get up to Nashville, and I would stay 5 nights. The show was always Wednesday night. We would do it. We would have a 3 hour. They actually carved out, I think, 3.5 hours for pre-production voice work on Saturday afternoon, and I would work with the associate director, who was Walter C. Miller's right-hand person, and that was Sharon Taylor. And we worked on every show together, except maybe the last 2. She retired, but we had a blast. So we would do all those things, like we would start with the opening, appearing tonight, so and so, yeah, and then we would always do those. Coming up next, who will be honored as the male vocalist of the year? Will it be Alan Jackson? That kind of thing. And they would roll the video. This is where I got used to matching voice to picture.
Did you stand backstage and do that live announcing? And what was that like? Because I know some of it was pre-recorded, but what about some of the live stuff? What was that feeling?
In the earlier years, they would have a makeshift. They would take one like an office in the arena, and they would just drape it with acoustical, and they would bring all the stuff in. All the audio department would bring everything that you needed, and they almost didn't want you to bother with touching anything. But I would always bring my microphone, my Sennheiser 416, and the reason for that was I'd use the same microphone here in the studio.
Yeah.
We got to the point where we would streamline those edits for the coming up next tool, or the entertainer of the year. And there would be a scratch track that the engineer would do, but he would do it to my voice. And then when I come to town, we'll just match it. We'll just cover it again for what if you need it redone. A lot of them, I saved them so much time that one time we did the whole session. Mind you, they would carve out 3.5 hours. We did, I think the fastest we ever did was an hour and a half to do all the pre-production for a 3-hour show. And so, I really helped them out. So later they had a small trailer that they had a built-in studio in the trailer next to the Denali. It's called the Denali Production Studio, and all the big major, from sporting events to award shows, use the same trailer that just pops out, and it becomes a massive control room where they all sit. It's amazing how many people they can get in there. So right next to that was the booth, and so I would have my own monitor. I would have the headphones with the program on one channel and then the control room on the other. And so I'd get a cue, that way. And it's kind of a wild feeling that there's this turret on a box there that as soon as you hit it, you're live on the air.
And it's got to be nerve-wracking. I mean, even though you are a professional, done it your whole life, when the light comes on and you have to speak, it's got to be kind of a scary moment.
Yeah, it is. It is. But you just have to realize, like with everything else that's going on, we're having a great time.
And did you ever make any mistakes or say the wrong name or anything happen like that?
That's a really good question, because I did have to back up. And how do you back up when it's live?
Yeah.
But originally they would put all of the walk-ups on one page, and I eventually asked them, could you put each category on one page, not all 5 or 6 of them on the same page? Because I would actually have to put my thumb. I didn't even have enough time to circle it or put a star by it.
Right.
I'd have to put my thumb by who I saw come up.
Yeah.
So one time I started to say Martina, I think, and it was somebody else with an M, and I backed up. But I don't think you could tell. I don't think you could. Well, I hope.
I know live announcing has just got to be, kind of put you in a hairy situation.
Well, and I wasn't completely disciplined in the regard of preparing yourself.
Mm,
I'm thinking of the Randy Thomas, who was the first female voiceover to be hired to do the Academy Awards. And I
that's
know
right.
she's done at least 10,
Many.
10,
Yep.
and she would say, I swear off alcohol, all
Mm.
citrus, all dairy, all of that for 30 days leading up to the show. And then she says,
Ah.
those after parties are so good because then I can just, have chocolate and champagne.
Right. Exactly. All the cheese I want.
Yeah, exactly. But I wasn't quite that disciplined. Hats off to her.
So with these stars, I know I've seen pictures of you with, just outstanding celebrities, big names. Would they just come backstage after they got their award, or how did you hook up and, get a picture with them?
You would pretty much have to seek them out or be in the right spot.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, a couple of years, the vocal booth was just steps away, literally steps away from the ramp that would go off of the backstage. So some of my favorite pictures, one in particular that I'm thinking about is George Strait with his producer,
I was
Tony
just thinking
Brown,
George Strait. I was just thinking of a picture of you with George Strait. Yeah.
because I was walking with the camera. I didn't stop them. I just walked past my booth and they both looked. No, he looked at me. George flashed this. I've never seen George Strait, and he's got a great smile, but I've never seen him smile like that.
Oh,
It's my favorite picture ever.
oh.
Another time I brought my 35 millimeter and because I had full access to go anywhere, I went behind the backboard at the red carpet, and there was a little opening about like that. And Taylor Swift, in maybe 12 years ago, she was at the top of her game when she was still really a big country artist.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew how to work the camera people and work her gowns and work the crowds.
Mm.
And she was doing it. And I got pictures behind her with her silhouetted. And so out of focus a little bit beyond her were the phalanx of camera people.
Oh.
I'll have to send you one. It's pretty cool.
I would love to see that. I've seen her.
Yeah.
She's a star.
Yeah, she is. She can
really
do no
is.
wrong.
Okay, let's jump ahead now into the radio imaging, how you do radio imaging. Do you have any? I know I don't know how to say this. Your organic career just happened the way, that lots of things happen. But if today a radio announcer or somebody who wants to get into radio imaging, like, oh, I'm just dying to do that, what tips would you give them as far as training or how to get prepared, that sort of thing?
Boy, that is something I really haven't thought a lot about. And here's my go-to is I always, when somebody says things like my family or my friends think that I have a great voice and that I should go into voice acting,
Yeah.
I always refer to them. My favorite resource is Randy Thomas and Peter Rafe co-wrote a book called Voice for Hire. And it really is the most comprehensive book on just the business and all aspects of voice acting in whatever application that may be, industrial, narration, commercial, live announce, everything. But as far as if somebody came up and asked specifically about radio imaging, I really don't know quite what to say.
I know.
There was a guy at Country Radio Seminar 5 or 6 years ago, and now he is in the business, but he said, my dream is to get to where you are, but how do you do it? How did you do it? How do you do it? And I said, it's almost like having a gift in the beginning. I don't think you can really conjure it up.
Yeah.
You can train it, but there has to be something that's God-given, that is a passion, where your heart beats for that application, that kind of work, and a confidence, certainly, but you have to have some, you have to have the chops.
And it's not just a good voice. We talked
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. Oh,
It's
that's true.
not just a good voice. It's the style, the phrasing,
Yeah.
everything that we talked about. You
Yeah.
have to be able to put all that together and then be able to replicate it. And that's hard too.
Yeah. How do you make the spoken word come alive?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and make it believable and make it sound like you're not reading it.
I
And it does
suppose,
take years.
You
Yeah.
can take classes on it. Lots of
Sure.
coaches offer it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say you have to have something in you, like you mentioned, where you really want to do it and you already have there's so many, it's complicated. So many things go into it. Then you have to have a great demo. Now, I suppose you're at a point where you don't even really need a demo anymore. Do you even make demos anymore or have them made for you?
You know, there are people who make a pretty good living creating demos for other people. They'll take
Yes.
their material, either they'll direct them with new material, or they'll take what they have. I just have always liked the hands-on. I do my own. I need to update it more, and yes, I do send it out. I will do cold calls. I feel like lately I've lost a couple of stations. Sometimes they'll say things like, well, you know, it's time to change the paint. I hate hearing that. What was wrong with the paint? What was wrong? What was wrong with the paint?
Yeah, there you go.
Because, but you know, it can be a number of different issues for whatever reason. Some new program director might have his or her favorite. Fortunately, I've been able to weather many regime changes. I have to tell you this is one of my jollies in as far as this whole arena of imaging. I have been hired back to at least 10 or 12 stations that for whatever reason didn't renew, or somebody else came on board, and then they'll come back. Sometimes I think the quickest was 6 months. I think they said, we didn't know what we were doing. I love that. And then another one was it was in Reno, and I had not been on there for 8 to 10 years. And I got to thinking, I think I tuned in one time and on Listen Live, and that's a great benefit that we have now that we didn't. You know, we were just kind of operating in the dark, really, unless you were driving through that market. Now you can hear everybody. And I think I was listening to them, and I was getting sentimental and kind of wistful about it, and remembering what a great time we had. And I just wasn't hearing it, you know, from their current voice. I didn't say that when I approached them. I said, you know, hey, I'm available in Reno. What do you think? And so I've been back on longer than the first tenure. So I love that.
Now, when you say you're available in Reno, that must mean that because you signed a contract, you can't do 2 or 3 stations. You can only do 1 station per market. Is that what you're saying?
When it's radio, yes. And sometimes when it comes to television as well, I know I had a situation where a TV station, I had to do a demo to prove that I wouldn't sound the same in radio imaging for this country station as I would doing topical promos for their news on the ABC affiliate in this particular city. Yeah. I actually had to jump through those hoops to make it happen.
Well, that's a really good point, because you did CNN for quite a long time, which is a completely different delivery than country radio. So you have to be versatile to do all these different things. Voice acting.
Yes, and voice acting and versatility. I've never ever wanted to be pigeonholed. I've never ever been a one-trick pony. It just goes against my grain. I can't do it. And I think that was one of the reasons. And yes, you're right. When you do things like CNN, it's got to be this very straight ahead, you know, purposeful delivery, and it's completely different than imaging for any radio stations. Yeah. And the best guy right now who does it is a legally blind guy. Maybe you know him by name, Pete Guston.
No.
Oh, he'd be a great person to interview.
Okay, I'm writing his
And
name down. Pete Guston.
He's been the topical news voice of Fox News Channel for maybe 6, 7 years.
I'll be
Oh, yeah,
darned.
I won't steal his thunder,
Yeah,
but I will say this about him. Here's another
yeah.
area that I'm undisciplined. Do you remember back when we were in a control room and our warm up was this? We'd cue up the record or whatever, or stick the cartridge in, and then we'd go, such a bad thing
It is bad. Yes.
for voice actors. But you know what Pete Guston does? He warms up, he says up to 45 minutes before he even cuts. Yeah, warming up his voice. And for him, there's a reason for that, because he does dozens of sessions a day. I don't know how he does.
I'm going
He's busy
to
all the time.
listen for him. He does Fox? I'm
Yes,
gonna listen for
Fox
him.
Fox News Channel. Yeah, Pete Guston
All right, very good. Well,
lives
John,
in San Diego.
I could talk to you for another 100 hours. Is there anything you want to mention that I forgot to ask you about? Something pertinent that you think we should know?
Ooh, well, we could talk about AI, but let's don't.
About AI. Oh my. Well, Bob Bergen said it's coming and there's nothing we can do about it, and that's just the way it is. I kind of believe him.
Yeah.
Hard to stop it when something like that starts, right?
Well, I love what Pat Fraley in one of your earlier video interviews, what he said, and that is you can't replicate exaggeration.
True, or real acting. Yes, I agree.
Real acting.
That's right.
I think it's gonna
nuances that you come up with, for instance.
Yes.
In the difference of, pretending to be a cowboy versus being, a country guy. There's the nuance there that maybe AI can't duplicate. We hope not.
And we'll leave it up to the audiences to determine that, because I don't think they want to be fooled. I think they want genuine. Yeah, I really think they want the genuine, the real thing.
Well, I'm going to leave
there may be a novelty to it.
Yes.
And I think it's going to hit a brick wall. That we'll come to our senses.
We'll see.
I hope.
It's the news recently is it's going to take so many people's jobs. I mean, we don't even know what the future is. What I'm going to leave you with is, because I think I've asked you so many great questions. What are your plans? Where are you headed? I know you have a beautiful, fantastic studio. Are you just going to keep doing what you're doing? You want to branch out into something different? If there's anything left for you to do, what are you thinking?
Well, I was asked at the onset of the explosion of podcasting to do a podcast, and I said, I'm too busy. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I'm still on the fence about it, but more probably not going to, because there are so many good ones. I'll tell you, for longevity, my hero is a guy by the name of Johnny Gilbert. People may not know the name, but you certainly know the voice. This is Jeopardy!
Yes.
He's going to be 95 in July.
Wow.
And he still sounds the same.
Yes.
And there are people who sounded the same. Ken Nordine, one of the great colorful voices. He's the guy who did those iconic Levi spots, the Levi's, where he had, and what else did he do? Word Jazz, The Colors. I'll send you some stuff on that too. You'll love that. But he was in his late 90s, and he was still active, still sounded the same. So if you love what you do and you keep at it,
you want to keep doing it. And how blessed you are and me that we haven't lost our voices. We've changed, our voices have changed a little bit, but we can still kind of put them where we want to. And
that's right.
And we're lucky with that. And
well, I'll tell you, one of the great thrills, though, and it's completely pro bono work. Obviously, I wouldn't want to be paid for it. Is being the scripture reader in my church.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Do you do you mind if we do you have that SoundCloud? Can you give that out, or is that something private you don't want to?
Oh, no, that's
Can
public.
You tell us a little bit about that? Because it's absolutely stunning work. And I know you're proud of it. So how do we
Well, that
find that on
was,
SoundCloud?
I think it's just, I think the channel name is just John Willyard. Just find me under, yeah, Willyard,
So is
John
this on
Willyard.
your website? The
No, it's on
SoundCloud page?
SoundCloud.
Okay, and what's
It's
the name of what you sent me?
Easter narration, but that was for another church. Now that
Okay.
was for a friend of mine. That's funny that you mentioned that, because that was a relationship that I started in when we were at Bill Young in Sugar Land, Texas, just outside of Houston, at a pretty good sized church there in Sugar Land, Texas. But now he's up in the Dallas area, and he works with, oh, they've got a fantastic media and worship arts department it's called Fellowship of Las Colinas. But our church is in Atlanta. It's called Church of the Apostles.
Mm-hmm.
And our pastor is Egyptian born, and he has a real heart for reaching Muslim people. Now, we do have a Kingdom Sat satellite system that rebroadcasts the messages, and they're actually translated into 29 of the most spoken languages in the world. And I have the privilege of reading some responses from people. Oh, my word. When the light goes on, when they see hope and light of the gospel, and they see that they've been living in despair and darkness in these third world countries, being dominated by Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And now they say, and I see this repeatedly, they'll say, I would rather die for the truth than to live for a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Because, Bo, they're seeing persecution like we've never seen.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what some of them say. They say, we're praying for you in the West and you in America to be persecuted like we are. Not saying this is, mean or a hex on you. That's not what they're saying. They're saying this clarifies your faith. This strengthens your faith. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Well, I know your heart is in that, John.
Yes.
I know you well enough to know your heart is in that. And thank you for telling us about that today. And I hope I wish I could I'm going to find it and hopefully put it underneath the YouTube if I can find that Easter narration.
Yes.
Because it is absolutely stunning. And your voice, couching, that's the word that we like. When you couch your voice into the music, it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Do you mind if we give your website address? I mean, does it matter? I don't know. JohnWillyard.com, right?
Well, but there's nothing there because my partner lost his servers, and I just pursued it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I still have the
people want to
domain
get a
name.
hold of you, they got to go through Atlas.
There you go. I love it. Yes.
That's right.
Ask for me by name.
Ask for John Willyard, Willyard.
That's it. Wow, you've been so kind. You've been so kind and sweet.
Oh, thank you, John.
And gracious.
I love this. I found out things about you that I find so fascinating, and I just love you. And thank you so much for doing this with me. It means the world to me. It really does.
Bo, thank you so much.